Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Three in the Keystone, episode 29. It's a two-man show tonight. I got Chris with me. Al Ryan has tapped out due to a stomach bug, although you wouldn't know it if you were following our Twitter account today, as he was getting blasted by the PGA golf community.
What a cold.
I got to imagine he was sitting on the toilet just tweeting away as the stomach bug flows through him. But my notifications were going off the wall today on Twitter.
Well, speaking of that, you're the road dog all of a sudden. The
Yeah,
road warrior.
Binghamton, New York tonight.
Okay.
Ever been up here?
What are you at a Motel 6 or what?
Nah, this is a Marriott.
Okay.
Yeah, Tony Kornheiser spot. He's a graduate of Binghamton University.
Is he?
Campus is right across the street.
Okay. Also, before we start, I got the hoodie on. I got to shout out my Temple Owls. Big win against number one Houston this weekend. First time they beat the number one team in the country since Kenyon Martin's Cincinnati Bearcats went down to the Owls in 2000. I remember that game, actually, too, that game. I think that was on the road.
Former number one pick in the draft. Did you see what the Temple Twitter tweeted at the Phillies?
No.
They were like, this is for you, Philadelphia. Because they beat Houston.
Oh, yeah, they tried to have that stupid I don't know if you saw enough of the game, but I think it was halftime. They had some Astros that were there, and they had the Astros World Series champion flag on the court. And I'm like, oh, really? Against the Philadelphia school, the college, this is the day you're going to do this? That's what's up.
I didn't see. I did tune in for like the last minute when we were texting, and I saw that it was a game. I can't believe they missed that last shot at Houston.
Oh, yeah. And that's exactly how we lost against Memphis. It was very similar. It was like 1 point or 9 or 2 point, something like that low on the clock before the game ended. And they had an inbound play. Guy hit like a 8-foot turnaround jump shot and won the game. I think it was like 61-59. But more importantly, aside from winning the game, we also, word on the street is that Mattress Mac, that rat, lost $2 million in that game.
Did he?
Evidently,
I think he had a lot of dough on the Cowboys too.
Yeah. So actually, I might be mixing it up. He might have bet on Dallas, but was also tweeting or something about the Houston game.
I know he has futures on Houston to win the NCAA title. I'm sure he probably bets on every game. That guy's a lunatic.
Yeah.
He's like a cartoon character.
Well, that's basically what he is.
Yeah, but hey, making a lot more money than me and you.
Yeah, maybe he'll pay some money and get the Minute Maid Park some real snacks.
No, that Cheetos popcorn, that was some of the best stuff I read. That was so bad for me, probably.
Yeah, maybe he'll pay money to get a second exit for that stadium. I remember everybody was going out the same spot.
Build some bars around the restaurants,
some lights.
Hotels. Yeah. But let's get into tonight's episode. We have our usual 3 segments for you. We're going to start with segment 1, which is going to be our Philly recap segment. And Chris, I don't know if we have a lot to talk about with this game. If you listened to the podcast last week, we told you there was nothing to be scared about. You could have gone to bed by halftime. The Eagles lay a whooping on the New York Giants, 38-7. Was never a game. The Giants are nowhere near the class of the Eagles. Hurts looked good enough. The Eagles end up running for 268 yards. Kenneth Gainwell, 112. Miles Sanders for 90. Boston Scott scores his usual touchdown, that has to irk the Giants fans to the end.
So I saw on Twitter a lot the Giants fans were like, we got to sign this dude. I'm sick of this. We're sick of it.
Dude, it's got to be shtick. Like they're just giving him the ball at the goal line just to continue.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The game was 14-0 before you blinked an eye. They sacked Jones 5 times. I'll sit here and I'll say, I went through a game plan last week where I was big on the Eagles corners and just letting them out on an island on Hodgins and Slayton. And Hodgins and Slayton combined for 2 catches for 7 yards. And that's in a pass rush. So the Eagles, they just came out and did what they were supposed to do. The stadium was electric. They did the job. So I guess my question to you, is there anything in that game, anything at all that you did not like?
No. What else you got? No, I mean they just controlled the game. I had mentioned it. I said that I didn't think it was going to be a game. I'll be honest with you. I the whole week leading into that game, I have not been as nonchalant and carefree / confident in a playoff game like that ever in my history of fandom with the Eagles. That game, I was not worried or concerned an iota. I brought it in the podcast last week saying how I thought that the game was going to be a blowout. I thought that the national media was literally coming up or trying to come up with anything to build a storyline for this game, because I think at the end of the day, in their heart, they knew that this game was a mismatch. And for ratings purposes, for whatever other purposes they had, a lot of them are from the area up there, wanted to believe that maybe these guys can keep staying hot and pull off this upset, but they knew in their heart that this was a joke. I said they'd win big. They did. We all agreed that it was pretty cut and dry, and at least bit that the Eagles would at least win the game. The Giants had a decent little season. I'm not going to discredit that. Brian Dable did a great job
compared to their expectations.
Absolutely, did a great job. I think they were 6-1 at one point, or 5-1.
Yeah, they did finish. I think I heard on the radio today, like their last 9 games was like 3-5-1. So it's not
and that's the same team that they kept trying to say was a red hot team against coming into that game. Hot where? They beat a bad team. Well, I won't say bad, but they beat an overrated team on the road that has an awful, terrible defense.
It was a team that they matched up really well against.
And they saw them already a few weeks before that.
Right.
So, I never understood where this whole, riding a hot hand theory came in with the Giants in that game. They were not a hot team. With that being said, they have a little bit to build off of in that game, I think. I don't know. I mean, in a normal situation, normal season, you'd say, well, Daniel Jones had a decent year, better than he had previously at least. But now, it's a contract year. If you were a GM of the Giants, are you hitching your wagon to Daniel Jones?
So here's my thing. That's a great question, because I was going to talk a little bit about this in segment 2. And I understand this point has to be taken with a grain of salt, because I'm not a GM in the NFL. And at the end of the day, if your team doesn't succeed in the NFL, as a GM, you're going to get fired. So that's a different point to play into it. But if I have job security and I know I'm trying to build a Super Bowl winning team, I'm not signing Daniel Jones to another contract.
I mean, you can't what has he done to warrant the money that the market is giving NFL franchise quarterbacks right now? What did he have for his, I think he had a great year on the ground. He had 700 and something yards on the ground, which is really good for a quarterback, all that kind of stuff. But I think he threw, if I remember correctly, I think he only had 15 touchdown passes.
Yeah, and to his credit, they didn't have many weapons. They don't have many weapons for him outside of Saquon. But here's where I'm at. And this may ruffle some feathers altogether. I've said this many times on the podcast. You either have an elite quarterback that you are willing to give money to that can win you a Super Bowl, or you need to go with a quarterback on a rookie contract and build teams around them. 4 teams left in the NFL playoffs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Philadelphia Eagles, Jalen Hurts is making $1 million.
For now.
That allows them the flexibility to build a hell of a team around him.
Right.
Brock Purdy is on a rookie contract, as was Trey Lance, as was Garoppolo, was not making a lot of money. They build a monster team around him.
Well, didn't Garoppolo just get, or didn't he?
Yeah, but he didn't get big money. He's not getting the $30
million. No. But he got a little bit.
Yeah, but I'm
more than the other guys you're mentioning, definitely. But right, I get your point. He's still not to the upper echelon of the guys.
He's not killing your cap with what you're doing.
Right.
Joe Burrow, rookie contract, build team around him. And then Patrick Mahomes is a guy who can win you Super Bowl, so you pay him. Those are the 4 guys that are left. And if you look at even go back around, you got the 8 teams that are left. You had Trevor Lawrence was on a rookie contract. And there was one other guy Daniel Jones was on a rookie contract. Those are guys that are not getting paid a lot and allows their team to build. And then the other 2 guys are Dak and somebody else, and Josh Allen, who, we could talk a little Josh Allen in the next segment if you want. But I still think he's worth the investment of building, even though the way he finished the year wasn't great. But if you invest in these quarterbacks that can't win you a Super Bowl, you're not going to go anywhere. And I'll be honest with you, and this is where I think I'm going to ruffle your feathers a little bit. If you're the Eagles GM, you have to pay Jalen Hurts because of what he's done this year, what he means to your team and your organization. And that's where I go to GM job security. But I have concerns if Jalen Hurts is making $30 to $40 million and you lose 5 or 6 players in free agency this year because they have a lot of expiring contracts, whether or not Jalen Hurts can lead a team with less talent to a Super Bowl. I don't know if he can do it. He can lead this team to a Super Bowl. But we'll talk in the offseason about how many unrestricted free agents the Eagles have, and it's a lot. And if they have to commit, it's not even going to be $30 million. It's going to be $40 to $45 million a year to Jalen Hurts. There are going to be a lot of guys who end up losing their job with the Eagles because they have to pay Jalen Hurts, and that's a concern of mine looking forward.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of things to unpack there. So first, I'm just going to go off of what comes on top of my head as far as the order of it. But Jalen Hurts. The Eagles blew the doors off the Giants Saturday night, and Jalen Hurts didn't even have to have a huge game. So that's number one, which was impressive as far as the overall team is concerned.
Right. That team's awesome.
Yeah. The other thing is when you talked about the 3 of the 4 remaining quarterbacks being on rookie deals, but I would argue, though, well, it's not really an argument. You're going to have to pay Burrow. You're going to have to pay Hurts. Mahomes has already gotten paid. So 3 of those 4 are eventually going to not be in that bracket anymore, and they're going to be paid the bag big time.
Let me clarify. I'm okay paying a guy if you believe he can carry that inferior team to a championship. I'm sure Patrick Mahomes can do it. I've seen it. I'm sure Joe Burrow can do it from what I've seen. I'm not sure if Hurts yet. I'm not there just yet on Hurts.
Okay. So, do you think that? Well, first of all, did you hear what Marcus Spears said by any chance today?
I did not.
He's late to the part. At least the 3 in the Keystone had this before he did. But remember, I had said a few weeks ago about the Eagles potentially being a dynasty in the making. He also said that today. He said that he saw that. And similarly to what your point is, the questions of that statement were about building the team overall with Hurts getting a huge contract after this year. And then they talked about Dak, how he got a big contract, and the team, this year was what it was, and how they weren't able to afford a lot of guys, and Stafford and the Rams. It kind of was questioned as far as if that's ultimately feasible. And we talked before, I think Al brought it up previously, how Brady was able to win all those rings, but he never took the full bag. He always was able to say, I'll make money on either the back end, or I'll make money in endorsements off the field, whatever, and you could pay me less. And I think if Hurts wins the Super Bowl this year, and I think he will, I really do. I've said that from the beginning of the playoffs to you guys. I'm not afraid of jinxes. I don't believe in them. I think that the Eagles are going to win the Super Bowl this year. I'll just say that right now. I think that Hurts is very marketable, extremely marketable, actually. And I think that if he can get to that point where he can get, I'm not saying he's going to be Tom Brady marketable. I don't know that. Or even Mahomes. I don't know that. But he's definitely somewhere in there. Maybe he's willing to take that less money. But it's not just him, I think, with the Eagles that you have to have that conversation about taking less money. All these guys have said how they love this team. They love the locker room. They love leadership. They love all this kind of stuff. Who else is willing to take a little bit less money to stay in this organization and to stay with this ride? And I think that's a big part of it also, especially guys like, if you even are interested in keeping him, Miles Sanders, guys like James Bradbury, guys like Javon Hargrave, even like Sam Alou.
So I pulled up a list, and I'll just run very quickly through the at least main guys that are going to be free agents this coming year. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, Javon Hargrave, Jason Kelsey, who I expect to retire, James Bradbury, Isaac Seumalo, Andre Dillard, Kaiser White, TJ Edwards, Sue and Joseph, who you can call it big or not, Boston Scott, Miles Sanders, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, and Marcus Epps. All free agents coming year.
Yeah, I think that my gut tells me that at least one of those guys will get their money.
Oh, there's going to be a couple.
And as far as like what they actually are, like what the market's going to dictate without having to do a pay cut. I think that Howie's willing to pay.
Oh, you're talking about from the Eagles?
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Yeah, I
think
agree.
Howie's going to be willing to pay Gardner Johnson based on the fact that the safety market blows, and they did give up some assets to get him this year. I don't believe that they did that just for 1 year rental.
Plus, he's 25.
He's so young, absolutely. So I think he's the one that's going to get paid. Bradbury's a guy, and Miles Sanders is a guy who I'm curious to see if they're willing to take less money to stay. I don't think that.
I can't imagine Miles is going to. Like, he's 25 and he's a running back. Like,
and the market, right. The price for those guys are so much lower than other positions.
Right.
So I think he's got to get what he thinks he's worth. And he had a great year this year. And I congratulations to him. I think that's awesome. He deserves it. I've been a Miles Sanders fan since we got him. I think I think the organization is finally letting him be the guy that I thought he was from the beginning. I thought he was a 1,000-yard rusher. I thought he was a guy who could be a number one guy. I thought he was a guy that could be a bell cow. Honestly, I think they still don't use him as much as they could as a passing receiver. I know that they have Gainwell and they use Boston in different situations like that in third downs, but I think Miles is very capable of catching the ball. He did it in college. And I think he showed a little bit his rookie year too, but he had a couple. I think it was his rookie year, the second half of his rookie year, or the beginning of his second year, where he had a little bit of the case of the drops. And I think ever since then they just haven't trusted him to play in that role. Right. But yeah, he's a guy, and Bradbury. Look, man, if they can draft a corner and somehow keep Bradbury and have that corner be able to roam in the slot or whatever, have Gardner Johnson stay as safety, they're going to they're still going to be extremely good on that side of the ball. In my heart, do I think that he's going to be here? No. But that's also a reason that's important why, again, with the draft and having the 10th pick and the pick, hopefully 32nd pick at that point, will be important to replace him on the cheap.
And as a point of reference, I just clicked in again. Spotrax is a pretty good reference. Bradbury right now is signed at $7.2 million, and if you click his market value, they're estimating
at least
$17 million a year.
Yeah.
So and the same thing with,
Hargrave is due for a huge bump too.
20. So there's considerable upgrades there, but you're right. The key part of this is drafting,
and I think they'll keep TJ Edwards. I think that they'll let go of Kaiser White, and they'll have Nakobe Dean play more next year.
They do have Dean. They do have Dean ready to go.
Yeah, so that's good that they can reload someone again off the cheap, put him right in.
Right.
And I don't have any. I have faith in Nakobe Dean. Jordan Davis, same thing next year. He'll come right in and he'll take one of those spots on the D line. Maybe Fletcher next year. Fletcher Cox, maybe he gets a deal similar to what Sue and Linval Joseph got, like a cheap veteran deal to stay with the team. I don't think Brandon Graham stays. I think he's done. I think he's a guy I think he's a guy that if they win the Super Bowl this year, I think him and Kelsey go off in the sunset together.
Maybe even Fletcher. Like, I don't know. Maybe I don't know how much these guys have left in the tank, but you're right. If they win, Brandon Graham, I could easily see Brandon Graham hanging it up.
Yeah. And remember, I remember the days where we were pissed at Brandon Graham. His rookie and his second year, he was a late bloomer. We thought he was going to be a bust when we saw how he played that rookie year. He didn't do much of anything. Second year wasn't much, but he has become a Philly all-timer. And I tip my hat to him. I never, if you had told me that this would happen with Brandon Graham back then, I would have laughed at you and said you were clueless. He doesn't have it in him. And I would have been totally wrong. He has been awesome. And I think he's the kind of guy, both him and Kelsey, I think are guys that are going to be Philly guys even after their careers are over, whether it be in the media.
Kelsey's a legend. Like, he'll never have to pay for a meal anywhere.
No. And I always say, when they're done, I'd love to see the Kelseys in WWE. I think that'd be awesome. I think they're both good for it too. Like, they both would have mic skills. Yeah, they both would have mic skills. They both are athletic enough to be able to do some bumps and take bumps and learn moves and how to run the ropes. But even still, I could see Kelsey or Brandon being, like on the radio or something like that locally, or even maybe nationally. But I know Brandon, that's like one of his, I think he said before that that's one thing he'd like to do when his career was over, was get into media. So I could definitely see that being here. But yeah, those are guys that I think will be able to be replaced with younger kids that we have now that are going to be, ready to go as far as their careers are concerned next year. But I'm sure we'll talk more about the draft as we go, in the offseason, things like that, as far as who we think we're going to be looking at or what we're going to do with that, especially with that 10th pick.
Right.
But I think there's a lot of value in that pick for the Eagles, either to utilize it to replace or get depth somewhere on the cheap in a big position, or to trade it and continue to keep the ball rolling with the first round picks throughout the years.
No, absolutely. And I think to kind of close it up, I think the other part of this that I wanted to mention is, I'm not going to pretend to be a NFL salary cap expert, because the NFL salary cap is confusing as it gets with the signing bonuses and restructuring of deals. But what having a quarterback on the cheap not only allows you to do, obviously, is sign additional guys, but when you make a mistake in free agency, and you're going to make some, it's easier to cover it up because you have so many other options you can go to, or so much more flexibility. When you look at, again, like a great example of the rookie contract, there's so many of them. Like, you look at Russell Wilson, like on his rookie contract, Russell Wilson was able to bring his team to the Super Bowl. When Russ got the bag, that team went down. You look at Dallas. Dallas is another one. They're sitting here with Dak Prescott, and you're like, where am I going? Where am I going? But at the same time, from the GM standpoint, it's like, if I start over and we suck, am I going to get fired? Like, am I okay hitching my wagon to Dak Prescott? I'm going to win 10 games a year, and we're going to be decent enough to keep my job. Like, it's easy for me to sit here and say, you should get rid of that guy and try and start over with another quarterback. But there's job security from the GM standpoint that you have to think about.
Yeah, and I actually want to go back to the Giants for a quick second, because I'm actually fascinated by the Giants this offseason for them. Not only do they have Daniel Jones conversation, obviously they have the Saquon Barkley conversation. Having a running back that's in a contract year is not ideal, because they may have been really good for you for that year, but traditionally running backs don't get paid a huge amount. However, Saquon has been, he came into the draft a few years ago, second overall pick, generational running back talent. And he still has it in him. I think he still has it in him. I think that the Vikings game showed it. I think the second half of the season showed it. He still has it in him to be a dominant dude in this league. From a football perspective and a PR perspective, even, I don't know if they can afford to get rid of either one of those guys.
That's the worst thing that happened to the Giants this year, was them being competitive.
I agree 100%.
Because they can't, especially in that New York market, you can't go, well, we got to the playoffs this year, but now we're getting rid of our quarterback and our running back. And you might say it's insane to try and get rid of Saquon Barkley, but look at Zeke, right? Zeke gets the second contract. He's a shell of himself now. Even if you want to go back in time, like, remember Larry Johnson on the Chiefs?
Yeah.
Dude, for these running backs, it turns quick.
Yep.
And if you're
DeMarco Murray, look how we know first.
DeMarco Murray's another really good example of a guy. Now, to Saquon's credit, like, he hasn't had the workload that those guys have had because he's been injured. So he's got less carry. So you might get one or two more really good years out of him. But the length of that contract, he may be better suited. Like, could you see, I think we mentioned this earlier in the podcast, could you see Saquon like fitting on Kansas City? Like a team that's like, we're on the brink, right?
That would be. And
put him and Pacheco in a committee. Like, that's a good fit because they're on the brink. But again, they do, for the New York guys, the best thing that New York did was bring in Dable, because Dable can coach. But now they got to make a decision. I think the best thing for the Eagles would be them re-signing Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley.
Absolutely. And the Giants have already gotten burnt with money. Like, they got burnt with the Galladay contract.
Right.
So that's also going to be interesting. Like, we're talking how, like, those are big name dudes and that market and this and that, but they tried with that market to get a big dude, and
one of the worst contracts ever.
I don't know what happened. I mean, he had injuries, but like, even when he played, like, they can't get him on the field.
I thought he was really good in Detroit. I don't know.
Yeah, he was. And all of a sudden he forgot. It's almost like the Markelle Fultz of the NFL. Like, he all of a sudden forgot how to play football. Like, he can't stay healthy, and when he does, he's not productive, and it's strange. But all that being said is why I wasn't worried at all about this game. I was more stressed watching the Sopranos series finale back in the day than I was at this game, honestly. I was not all week. I was on Twitter. I'm going back and forth with Giants folks because I'm just laughing at how ridiculous and how stupid they sounded, thinking they were going to come into here on their third straight road game, beat a team that they haven't beat here in 10 years, and move on to the NFC champion. It was just laughable, but
it was.
I'm really looking forward to see what they do this offseason because and in the division, all the teams, Washington, Dallas, like they all have issues that I'm really interested to see how they play out.
For sure. It's going to be an interesting offseason. And for those of you guys who are looking for the preview of this week's championship game, segment 2, we're gonna dive into both NFC and AFC championships and give you our preview and our picks. So stay tuned for segment 2. But I do want to move into our second half of segment 1. We generally do a Philly recap for the week. And while all this is going on, all this Eagles hype is far and away what's taking the attention of the city, our Philadelphia 76ers, Chris.
Clap your hands, everybody.
18-4 in their last 22 games. They just come off a 5-game road trip out west, win all 5 against, I have Utah, Lakers, Clippers, Portland, Sacramento without Embiid and Harden from 21 points down. Did you watch that whole game against the Kings?
I didn't actually. I forgot it was on. I watched the football game and I was watching some post-game stuff. And then before I went to bed, I put it on, and I'm lying. I put it on for like a quick second. I saw they were down like 20 early in the game, and I was like, all right, it ain't their night. It's their 5th game on the road. They'll probably take this L. I'll put football back on. And then I checked my phone, and I saw that they were up 3, and I was like, what? So I put it on, and I watched like probably like the last 7 minutes of it.
Yeah, I'll confess. Listen, I am as diehard Sixer fan as he is. I don't miss any games, and I watched the first. They were down like 20 in the second quarter. They cut it to 10, and I was into it. And then it got pushed back to 18. And I said the same thing you did. I was like, it's not their night. I was beat. I'd stayed up for every West Coast game, and I went to bed. I woke up in the middle of the night. I had a text from a loyal listener, Liam, who's been on the podcast, and said, "Are the Sixers the GOATs?" And I looked at the score, and that was when they were up 3 with like 4 seconds left. And I just was scrolled to play-by-play for the rest of the game. Of course, Thibault fouls. Of course he does. Yeah. And they get a break. They miss the free throws. But listen, this team is now, I have these stats here, 7th in offense. They're 4th in defense. They're 5th in net rating. They're 2nd in the East, only behind Boston. They have played the easiest schedule in the NBA. So the question I have for you.
But let me cut you off for a second, though, because it has been easy overall. But that stretch is very difficult for especially an East Coast team to do that. That 5 games on the road in a row and come out on top of all those games is still very difficult, regardless of who you're playing out there.
I tip my cap, like to win a West Coast road trip, go 5-0. Sixers haven't won swept a 5-game road trip in it was like 30 years.
84-85 season, 5-0 to sweep a West Coast road trip.
And the only caveat I'll give is I think the West is blood. Like the Western Conference is finally, like, the East is better than the West.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But with that said, my question I have for you, as we've been through this many times as diehard Sixers fans, has this stretch of basketball changed your expectations for this team moving forward?
Well, I've said before when we talk about the Eagles, how the season has to dictate your expectations. We all can start off with an expectation that we have in our head before the year starts, but as the year progresses, we have to adjust our expectations for better or for worse. And again, I revisit that Houston game. That was probably the bottom of the season.
That was when the run started. They were 12-12 after that game, and they're now I don't have it 30-16.
So that means what they've gone
18-4 in the last 22 games.
And so that was definitely the bottom. And this is definitely the top. And with all things being considered at that point, I think that they're right there in the East. I think that the West is not as good. I agree with you. But the East is top heavy, and from 4 down, I don't like Cleveland. I've told you that before. You guys are higher on Cleveland than I am. I don't like Cleveland. I don't like the Knicks. I don't like the Heat. I don't like and by the way, the Heat are doing what they always do and making a run in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the season, or out of nowhere, I should say, in the middle of the season.
Would you have any fear of the Heat if they added Bojan Bogdanovic?
No.
Or a player of that ilk to play power. So you're looking at a lineup of, let's say, Lowry, who we're not big on, Hero, Butler, Adebayo, and then a power forward, even if it's a Jay Crowder, or because they don't have anybody in that spot right now. I think Caleb Martin is holding down that spot.
Yeah, no, I don't. And by the way, what is Jay Crowder LeBron? Like, why is he this whole story with Jay Crowder? What is this about? Why do we care so much if he's holding out and wants to trade and who wants to trade for? Why is this a thing?
I heard on the radio the other day, it made such a great point, and it goes back to, I don't want to say the Ben Simmons thing, but like, so Jay Crowder's issue is he was going to lose his starting job, and he didn't want to lose his starting job, and I think it may be somewhat contract related, like he wanted an extension, and he's just like, all right, well, I'm not playing. Like, why are the Suns paying him?
I just don't.
Why should you have to pay a guy who's like, I'm not playing?
I agree, and that's all. Look, Kyrie, Ben, Jay, they're all going to be responsible for a whole new looking CBA. Because these guys, it's going to start being a pay to play soon. Like they can't, the league can't afford. The other day, the Warriors went to, what was it, Miami? Who was it? The Warriors played the other night and no one played. San Antonio, somebody.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank. It may have been like Memphis or Cleveland. No, Cleveland. I think it was Cleveland.
And they beat them. But they had, like, people had signs like, I brought my kid for the first game to see Steph, and he's not even here. Like, that's not cool. And I get, like, if you have an legit injury,
Golden State doesn't care about those fans. Like, you got it. The season's too long. We know that.
But the NBA should care, and it's still a part of their brand and their market. And absolutely. I think that's the difference. Like, you could put basketball X's and O's aside as a coach. Sure, I don't care about the other, especially when they're not my fans. But the league needs to care about this. There's some people who, politically, the NFL is not for them anymore. Whatever, I don't care. But there's also people who, in that same ilk, are the NBA is letting these guys run the league. They don't play when they don't feel like playing. And I'm supposed to pay top dollar to see a team without the stars because it's just an NBA game. And that's not cool. And I think that needs to change. So I think they had like Steph, Wiggins, Clay, Draymond. They were all out one game, and somehow those guys beat them, which is a credit to the Warriors' depth. And it was on the road, which they suck on the road. So that was ridiculous. But again, Cleveland's not good. They're a decent team. They're not a great team by any stretch. They started off 10-1, and now they're, a 5 or a 6 seed.
Here's my thing with Cleveland. I mentioned this last week. I don't think Cleveland is ready to compete with the upper echelon teams in the East. I just think basketball is so much matchups, and I just don't think the Sixers match up well personnel-wise than I do with Cleveland. Because I see, like, dude, tell me you don't see visions of fourth quarter, like the Cavs put Evan Mobley on James Harden, just like they did last year with Precious Achiuwa, like a long, athletic dude that could stay with him. And Jared Allen's guarding Embiid, and they're trying to run this pick and roll, and Cleveland's just switching it every single time. And it doesn't matter because both of those guys can guard those guys somewhat. So, like, I just think, and the fact is, they have two really good athletic guards off the dribble, and we don't have guards who stop penetration. So that's all. Like, I think from a matchup standpoint, that matchup scares me. And again, I'm not saying Cleveland will win that series. I just don't think the Sixers match up well with that team.
Experience, and also the Cavs aren't a great defense. Like, those guards aren't great defensive guards. I mean, they still got to deal with Harden. They got to deal with Maxey. They still have nobody that can guard Embiid.
They got
again, who does? But I mean, that's a big deal.
There is good enough. They got two big, athletic, long dudes. Like, nobody can guard Embiid, but like they got enough size in there to throw at him at least.
I think the Sixers win that series in 5 games.
I don't think it would be. I think the Sixers would end up pulling it out, but that series just scares me to death.
I was more nervous about Toronto than I'd be about the Cavs. Not this year. I'm saying Toronto's.
I remember you were very nervous about that series last year.
Yeah.
And I mean, let's hope. I don't see Cleveland getting out of the 4 or 5 ranking in the East. So let's just hope the Sixers maintain their status in regards to a top 3 seed, because it definitely would rather see. I'd rather see a play-in team. If Miami's just going to beat you up. The Sixers would beat Miami, but like, I'm not dying to see Miami.
And I think they would have beat Miami last year. If Embiid was healthy and played the full series, I think they would have won that series. I really do.
I mean, if Embiid wasn't healthy for many series, we would have put the series. So do you think the Sixers team is good enough to get to an Eastern Conference final as is?
Yeah, I think they are. And I think that it goes in no particular order: Boston, Milwaukee, Sixers, Brooklyn. And the only reason I'm saying Brooklyn is because of Kevin Durant, not because of Kyrie Irving, and damn sure not because of Simmons. But I think that Durant is still a top 5 player globally, and I think that goes a long way. And I think even with Embiid on the Sixers, having a guy like him who is a mismatch against 90% of the NBA, 95% probably, goes a long way. And I think, and this is a guy. So I wrote down some things about Embiid.
Can I say something real quick about Brooklyn before you
switch? Yeah. Go ahead.
A guy you were completely wrong on is Nick Claxton. I watched the other game against the Warriors the other night. Nick Claxton's very, very good. Very, very good.
Okay. No, I mean,
that's all I have to say.
Disagree with that. I think he's okay. I'm not afraid.
Defensive player of the year front runner. I don't think he can guard Embiid. He's too skinny, but he's been awesome.
Yeah, I'm not losing sleep over Nick Claxton.
But go ahead, give me the Embiid stuff.
No, I was going to say. So speaking of that road trip, he's now 9-0 against the LA teams in his career.
I saw that.
He plays. He leads the league in NBA in usage percentage, 37.9%. He's going to qualify for the all-time points per game list in a few games. I don't know if did you see that?
I saw that stat. He's like 5th. And if you look at the minutes played, he's way below all of those guys.
Yeah, he's about, when he goes in, I think he has like 8 more games or 9 more games to go. He'll be officially eligible. When he goes in, he'll actually be 7th, currently 7th, as of this minute, at 27.6 points a game, just ahead of Iverson for 8th all time. The names ahead of him, in order, starting from 1, Michael Jordan, Wilt Chamberlain, Elgin Baylor, Kevin Durant, LeBron James, Jerry West. And y'all want to give, not you, but the league wants to give Nikola Jokic 3 straight MVPs.
That leads
you know what the ironic thing is Jokic might deserve the MVP this year.
He's Jokic, and the thing is that sucks is I'm on your side. Like Jokic gets way too much hype, especially compared to Embiid. Like to say that Jokic is a definite better player than Embiid is just wrong. Like they are, you can argue either side, but like it makes the Philadelphia fans like talk like Jokic is not a good player. Jokic is phenomenal. He is.
Here's my thing with Jokic, and I've said it a million times. If you can't play 2 ends of the floor, if you can't play offensively and defensively and be as good on, at least close to as good on both, I can't put you in that conversation. I just can't.
I agree. And
Jokic is not that. He's not even close to Embiid defensively. And offensively, it's not a big gap.
But the problem is, especially when it comes to MVP and stuff like this, and this is where I went on that dissertation when I did the solo episode, is for whatever reason, and I agree 100%, Jokic is not a good defensive player. But the analytics, I heard this on the radio today, defensive like box plus minus, some analytics out like that. Nikola Jokic is the number 1 player in the NBA. I don't know how that's feasible, but he has broken the analytics model, and therefore anybody who's trying to defend, Jokic as far as a defensive player just relies on those stats, and then that makes their case for them. It's bullshit.
And that's what I was going to say. And all the stat nerds all get Woods over Jokic's next level, next generation stats that like I always joke on Twitter, like he leads the league on points per game on a Tuesday when it's over 45 degrees outside and the AC is on in the arena and it's Taco Tuesday. Like every little thing like the other night, right? He had the triple double and they said it was I think the first time in the history of the league that somebody had a triple double without missing a shot.
I saw that.
And I'm like, hold up. He had like 6 shots.
5 for 5. He took 5 shots.
What? So that's like a historic epic game.
I know. It's bullshit.
And I just, you're right. And I'll be honest, I'm brutally honest. I'm guilty of hating on Jokic more than I should. He is a good player. He could do a lot worse than Nikola Jokic.
He's great.
He is like Embiid and him are definitely the best big men as far as the center position is concerned in the league. I
said on a podcast the other day, I've watched plenty of Denver this year. He's the best passer in the entire league, not just center. Like he's the best passer in the entire league.
Number 1 on the Sixers got something to say about that too. I think Hard's excellent.
Jokic is the best passer,
but and that's fine. That's not a hill I'm trying to die on. I'm not. You might be right with that. I just think that, bro, like like people forget how to just watch basketball. Yep. It's like we live in this generation where you go to a game and everybody in the stands is on their phone and they're filming the game. and they're filming everything around them, and they're not even looking at the game themselves and getting that same full experience. And that's how I feel we have with this generation with stats. People just look at the numbers and crunch numbers like it's tax returns instead of actually watching these guys play basketball.
And they
watch them play basketball. Embiid, in my opinion, is the best, most dominant offensive center in the league. And you combine that with the fact that he is the best defensive center in the league, to me, makes him overall a better player. If I had to pick one guy to start a team with, and my options were, between those two, I'm picking Embiid. That's it. Because I get a guy that can do.
If I could guarantee a healthy Embiid, I'm with you. Jokic to his credit has been way more durable than Embiid throughout his career.
He's about to also be in the top 5 all-time in NBA history in 40-point games by a center. We already talked before about the fact that he had last year led the league in points per game, averaging over 30 points a game, which is the first time that ever happened. Happened. First time it's happened since Shaq in 2000, and the first time that a center averaged over 30 since Moses Malone in 82. That should be. And he was on a team that was a championship caliber contender last year when he did it. It wasn't on the Hornets or the Thunder last year, just getting all the buckets. Like, he's on a real legit team doing this stuff.
I'm going to make you even more mad. He's probably not going to start the All-Star game.
And that too. And I don't care as much about the All-Star game as I used to be honest. But yeah, it's also now. All right, I'll ask you this: who do you think he should be starting?
Yes. And
so who are you taking off for the front court?
This year, it's Giannis.
I agree.
Efficiencies are not great. But here's where Embiid gets screwed. And if you guys are going to listen to one point about this broadcast, listen to this. So for the All-Star game, we vote, and the fans get half the vote, the players get some of the vote, whatever. But they vote for 2 guards, and they vote for 3 players in the front court, right? So theoretically, you could have 2 guards and 3 centers. Or you could have 2 guards and 3 forwards, or any sort of combination in the front court of forwards and centers, right? You're with me?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say Embiid gets squeezed out here. It's going to be Tatum, Giannis, Durant. It's going to be 3 forwards on the front line. Now, at the end of the year, when we vote for all NBA, instead of having 2 guards and 3 front court like we do in the All-Star game, now all of a sudden we can only have 1 center. So why is that?
And I think
so now it's like we have to have Jokic or Embiid, but for an All-Star game, you can have 3 centers on the front line. Like, why can't I have 3 centers on my All-NBA team? Why on my All-NBA team can I have 2 guards and 3 guys in the front court?
Yeah, and the system as is literally handcuffing Embiid's accolades for his career because of Jokic. And you're penalizing Embiid because he plays in the same era or time frame as Jokic. And they need to scrap all that stuff. They need to scrap the positions with these awards.
It should be 5 best players in the league. Because you could sit here and say it doesn't matter, but I don't want to give any spoilers, but for segment 3 tonight, we're going to talk about the Baseball Hall of Fame. And when I'm looking at Baseball Reference, I'm looking at Gold Gloves. I'm looking at Silver Sluggers. I'm looking at All-Star appearances. Like, that stuff matters when at the end of the day, when you're looking at resumes and comparing players all time. Like, that stuff matters. How many first-team All-NBAs did you get? How many second teams? And if, Joel Embiid doesn't have any first-team All-NBAs, I don't think at this point in his career.
And not only that, I think that, no, he doesn't. And I think that the argument could be made that, well, I don't want to watch an NBA game where there's 4 centers on the court. But this is a generation now where those centers are skilled.
I would actually, even though it's this draft, I would love to watch Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic on the floor together as teammates. Like, that would be phenomenal.
Yeah, why not? I mean,
it's not Dwight Howard and Rudy Gobert.
I was just about to say, it sounds like you're having like Shaq and I don't even know, Alonzo Mourning or something like that, back in the day. Like, these guys are skilled dudes. So what?
Yeah.
And especially with the All-NBA awards, like you said, 5 best players. I don't care what position they are. If you got 5 point guards, if you got 5 centers, I don't care. We all know, as real NBA, as hoop heads and as real NBA fans, and you'll respect and understand. Like, okay, we got 4 centers and a power forward on our top 5, but guess what? Those are the best guys in the league.
Right. At the end of the day, assuming everything goes as planned this year, if it stays where it's at right now, Joel Embiid will be a top 3 MVP candidate 3 years in a row and will not have a first-team All-NBA on his resume. Bullshit.
Yeah.
But I want to close this segment with one question for you. Sixers, first of all, did you know that this week in the NBA is rivalry week? Has there been a poorer job of marketing than
What's this, college basketball?
Well, no, it's here. It's really that's what they're doing.
They're gonna have a coaches versus cancer classic.
Uh,
I didn't know that. I did not know that.
But which game would you, if they had to pick one game to win and one game to lose this week? Tomorrow they host Ben Simmons in Brooklyn. I'm assuming you're going because you going down tomorrow.
There's gonna be some weather, so I actually sold my tickets, but
or Denver on Saturday with Jokic. You can only win one. Which game would you rather see him win?
Brooklyn. It matters more. It's in the division. It's in the conference. It's against that rat, which we'll still see if he plays or not. Because
Embiid's questionable.
Yeah, so both of them are,
Joel has to play tomorrow.
I would think so, but we'll see.
So too.
But yeah, that's more important. The Jokic game is more fun. But as far as importance for the actual team and for the season and everything, the Nets game's more important.
That's fair. I would agree with that. And I'll always love sticking it to Ben Simmons, who.
And we want to bury we don't want the Nets, like they were red hot and then Durant got hurt and then they came back down to earth. Like, we don't want them to get a home seed position in the conference, especially not over us. So that's another reason why, to me, I mean, I think we're only a game or two ahead of them.
Yeah. They scare me less than Cleveland. I'm not worried about Cleveland in the playoffs. I just don't think, unless they make a move to get some size, like they don't have enough size inside for us.
I'm only the only team I'm really concerned with is the Celtics. I mean, the Celtics are the best team in basketball.
And if Milwaukee gets their stuff together, they're better than the Sixers. If they do, they haven't right now.
But they haven't really had their stuff together completely since the middle of last season. Yeah. Like, I mean,
they were good last year.
Middleton,
Middleton, when they lost Middleton, like they're a different team with Middleton, and he came back last night.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're more they're feared more when they have Middleton in that lineup than just having Drew and Giannis as the main guy. And Brook Lopez, I got to say about Brook Lopez, he's put himself in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year this year.
I don't think there is if there was a guy that you had to have guard Embiid one-on-one, is it not Brook Lopez? Is that not the guy you're picking? Like,
again, though, I'll take anybody. I'll take my chances against anybody with Embiid.
I know, but I'm saying if you had to, you would think who guard him the best, this might be Lopez.
As far as you're saying, guard contain Embiid, you're saying?
Yeah, whoever would guard him the best, I think it's probably like a Lopez. Because not only, like, I guess I say it on both ends. Like, first of all, Lopez on the offensive end has the ability to stretch him out, which gives him problems to the 3-point line. And defensively, he's big, he's strong, and he's long. And again, nobody's stopping Embiid, but like that's probably the best matchup, I think, for him. Especially if you have Giannis helping.
You know what's funny though? Like, you talk about stretching him out as a set. Like, Embiid that's one of his knocks, I guess, defensively, is that, yeah, if you have a center that can stretch the floor, he's a little bit sometimes slow to get out of him. But like at the same time, if he's in a switch and guards a guard, he can stay with them.
Yeah, no doubt. And like I think he can stretch out, but the problem is when he has to guard Lopez on the 3 line, is it opens up the entire paint because our guards can't guard penetration. And then
Giannis is going to just eat in the paint.
Right. And that's the problem. So
yeah.
And like you don't want Embiid will probably guard Giannis at times in a playoff series, but you can't have him on him for the full game because he's going to get in foul trouble.
Absolutely. And again, we talked about this before. This is the year. Like, if they don't get past that second round, things are going to happen that we don't want to happen.
Yeah. Let's not go there. There. Things are
good.
That's
why, that was a hard cut.
Things are good right now. But all right, that'll wrap up segment 1, our Philly recap. We'll jump into segment 2 in a minute, where we are going to give our previews of the AFC and NFC Championship games, as well as our picks. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to segment 2 as we jump into the NFC and AFC championships. We're going to start on the AFC since we did a bunch of Eagles talk already, where we're going to have a rematch of last year, the Cincinnati Bengals and the Kansas City Chiefs. But before we jump into that actual matchup, Chris, do you have any observations or quick recaps you want to give on either of these divisional games on the AFC side?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. did we all have the Jaguars covering?
I didn't, but I got screwed.
So Al and I had the Jaguars covering.
Yeah, but I
Like,
was closer.
it was a point, like it was like a point or two.
I had the game more correct than you guys, but you guys covered the spread. So you guys both had close games. You guys thought it was going to be close.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, because I thought the Jacksonville, and to be fair, it probably shouldn't have been as close as it was. If Mahomes is not hurt, that game might have been a 2-3 touchdown game.
So I say that I was closer than you guys because I actually had the final score of 30-20, and the final score ended up being 27-20.
Right.
But I don't cover because we're laying the 9.5. So you guys did. But for the rest of
that's part of the game, bro. That's part of it.
You guys both were 3-1 against the spread and 3-1 straight up. I was 2-2 against the spread, but I was 4-0 straight up in the picks. So I think straight up, actually, we're all 8-2 at this point in the playoffs.
Well, it's a lot better than the regular season was. That's for sure. Yeah, I think, to answer your question, I think that Jacksonville was solid in that game. They did about what I expected them to do, score about 20 points, give or take a couple. But
couple late turnovers, really.
Yeah, and you know, Doug has his teams in these situations prepared to play. I will give him credit. I think he's a better coach than I thought he was, even when I was all in on him leaving. In other words, I don't think I gave him enough credit. And the end of his career with the Eagles, there was a lot of injuries on the team. A lot of things were going on. Wentz was here, ransacking the organization with his crap. So it was a lot going on. But I'm not saying I want to have Doug over Sirianni at this point. That's I wouldn't go that far. But I do respect them. But that Mahomes injury, I called it as soon as it happened that he probably had a high ankle sprain just because of the way he fell on it. Anytime you have that pressure from the outside to the inside of your body, it's typically that's what it is. And a high ankle sprain is, I'd be shocked if I'll be honest, and I think I texted to you. I'd be shocked if he played this game. I don't care what he's saying. I'd be shocked if he played, and I'd be floored if he finished it.
I had a high ankle sprain in college, my freshman year of college.
Yeah, I've had it before. It's awful.
I think he's going to give it a go Sunday, but I can't see him being effective.
You have to be able to back up and plant your foot and everything else. And even if they were saying he can throw, for strength and accuracy off his back foot with just his arm strength. And you're right, because he used to be a baseball player and all that. But you still got to back up out in certain formations, and just that backpedaling, all that stuff is, and you got a bunch of dudes coming at you to break your neck. It's a lot.
And his game, his passing, his arm, his accuracy is all elite. But there's a decent portion of his game that's built on his mobility and his ability to create plays. And if that's hampered by any means, it's going to be an issue.
He's going to be a statue in this game.
Absolutely. But before I want to get further into this game, I want to talk a little bit about Bengals Bills. Are the Buffalo Bills the Philadelphia 76ers of the NFL?
It's funny you said that. I didn't know you were going to even bring that up. I was thinking that exact same thing. I was like, is Josh Allen Embiid? Is he like the superstar that is not going to be able to put it together ever to get to a championship?
I don't know. They just can't get over the hump. And I mentioned last week, he had the UCL injury mid-season, and stat-wise, it didn't affect him. But it seems like accuracy-wise, he fell off a cliff in the second half of the season.
He was not good in the Dolphins game.
He wasn't.
He was not good in this game. And I'm now on the train of saying that Josh Allen is overrated. I think he's a guy who people fall in love with because of his arm, and also because he has that rare combination of an amazing arm and can also beat you down the field with his legs. Only a few guys have ever really had the full package as a quarterback like he does, and the body that he has on top of that. But for whatever reason, when aside from that divisional game in 2021, that duel with Mahomes, that was a classic game, and that wasn't his fault. He did all he could to win that game, and they just didn't win it. But aside from that, to me, he's got to win that game, man. Like, I mean, everything that if you had a situation before the year and you said to a Buffalo Bills Mafia fan, yo, you're going to play the Bills in a divisional round, everybody's good, it's going to be snowing, and all that kind of stuff, all things being considered, you're taking that. And they had it, and they got beat up.
6-point favorites, and they got beat up is right. They looked like they weren't even in the game.
Beat up.
And to me, like, I'm not ready to say Josh Allen's overrated. I think that's easy to do at this point in time, but I think they need to change their system. They're so reliant on everything being Josh Allen, and they have two decent running backs that during the course of the year, they just don't use. I think they need to become more balanced.
Agreed.
And on times when the passing game's not working, they can go to something, because right now it's Josh Allen throws the ball or Josh Allen runs the ball.
And I don't know what their money looks like for that organization, but actually, you talk about the first segment. That's a team that I think becomes a whole different level if Saquon goes to. If Saquon gets to Buffalo, that would be a dynamic. You now have a threat at every offensive position with him, Josh, Stephon Diggs, and even Dawson Knox. Dawson Knox is becoming a nice tight end in this league. He's I mean, it's not a crazy quote unquote sexy position right now, but he's probably I would guess he's around a top 10 tight end.
Yeah, I'm not sure about how good of a blocker he is, but yeah, he's in that range. Maybe they need to upgrade one more receiver. Like,
that's what I'm saying.
I'm not sure if Davis is a 2 or a 3.
I think I thought he was a 2, but maybe he's I don't know.
But that's all. I mean, let's get more into Cincinnati and Kansas City. I just wanted to touch on Buffalo laying a complete.
He scares me though. Josh Allen he scares me in the sense that if I'm a Bills fan, I don't know what I'm supposed to be thinking about with this guy anymore. Is he like? And he's already, I believe he's already got paid, right?
Yeah, he's got it.
I mean, you're going to pay him even if he didn't.
Yeah, correct.
But like, for as good as he can be, I'm a little bit scared he's never going to get to that. Just like Embiid, same thing.
I'm shocked that there's not more Sean McDermott hot seat talk as well. They got completely. It's the third year in a row that they've got completely whacked, and not completely whacked in a playoff game, but like, you're a 6-point home favorite. Like, you got to show up. You can't lose by 17.
And again, all the conditions and everything else of that game, you got even just the momentum of having DeMar Hamlin in the building, like all that kind of stuff. You got to pull that game out, man. And it just was a sad effort. I don't know if those guys put too much pressure on themselves or what, but I picked the Bengals to win that game, but I didn't think it was going to be like that.
Yeah, I took the Bengals as well, but I agree with you. Let's get into Cincinnati and Kansas City. Would you believe the Chiefs opened as 2.5-point favorites? It is now already swung to Cincinnati minus 2.5.
Yeah, I believe it.
What'd you say?
I believe that. It's all the foot, the ankle.
No, that's absolutely what it is.
Yeah.
I have two big questions for you in this one. First one, more of a yes or no. Is the Bengals defense the most underrated unit left in the playoffs? Because nobody talks about how good they are. In the last 7 games, they've only allowed a team to score 20 points once. They are really, really good. And people talk about the Eagles defense. People talk about San Francisco's defense, talk about Kansas City's offense, talk about the Bengals offense. Nobody talks about the Bengals defense.
Yeah, I agree. And I love the Bengals. I'm a big Bengal fan right now with Burrow there and Jamar and all those guys. Like, I really like that team a lot. I feel bad that we're going to have to take a ring from them this year, and they're going to have to go back to back without anything to show for it. But man, that's been a really good. And Jesse Bates, did they ever pay him?
I don't think
they ever paid him. He was on the tag, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, he's a big part of that too with that defense. And they have a very underrated defensive line. Like Hubbard and Henderson are really underrated dudes.
Yeah.
And maybe because they wear the long sleeves and they're kind of like, they don't look like the typical, like they don't look like Nick Bosa. They don't look like, those kind of guys, but they get the job done. So yeah, I agree with you. They are underrated.
And Lou Anarumo, you know who that is?
Anarumo. No.
That's their defensive coordinator. Talk about a guy who has no attention on him.
Jake.
You don't even mention him. But The other thing I just wanted to bring up, and we'll talk about our predictions and where we're going to go with it. Is Andy Reid the second best coach in the history of the NFL?
He's on the way to becoming the best coach in the NFL.
Well, he's got to win. He's got to win a couple more Super Bowls. He's only
but you're always going to have that argument about was Brady the reason that Belichick won all those, or was it Belichick?
You say the same thing about Patrick Mahomes, like when it's all
especially after last week when Chad Henne took the squad down 98 yards. Is Mahomes a system quarterback? You hear anybody talk about that?
I knew that was going to happen. But Andy Reid has now been to 10 championship games. This is Kansas City's. Not only is it their fifth in a row, it's their fifth home championship game in a row.
Yeah, I saw the stat. You're probably going to get into about what he's the first coach to have coach two teams, not only in conference championships, but 5 conference championships in each conference.
Insane. He is second all time in playoff wins. He's tied for second. I'm sorry. If he wins one more game, he will be second by himself. And he's 5th all time in regular season wins, and he'll jump into 4th next year. I think he'll pass Tom Landry. He's like 3 behind him. So, I mean, listen, the guy is just everywhere he goes, he wins. And he's had a tremendous career.
Oh yeah, he's definitely. I actually was talking about this to somebody not that long ago. That same argument of if he is, where he stands in the pantheon of NFL head coaches, and he's at least going to end up being in the conversation, for best coach of all time.
I don't think he can pass Belichick because of the Super Bowls. That's always going to be a handful.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's got to get 6 more rings to get Belichick.
Yeah, I mean, even he's still got. I mean, if he gets 3 more, he's maybe in the conversation, depending where he ends up on the all-time list. But
he ain't a spring chicken either, so he ain't going to have all those 10 more years of. I mean, I think he's already 60 something.
Yeah, but I just wanted to give a shout out to him and the job he's done.
Oh yeah.
He's been awesome, and we were lucky enough to experience it. And again, it's one of those things where he was fired. It was time for him to go and time for him to start anew. It's not like it was a mistake letting him go at the time, but it was a pleasure having him as a football coach here.
I just wish that we could have won one with him.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's get into predictions. I'll go first. We talked earlier. I think we're on the same page. I don't see Patrick Mahomes being effective on a high ankle sprain. You mentioned he might not even play. I think he does give it a go. And like you said, maybe he doesn't finish this game. But I said last week on the pod, since he doesn't scare, they proved it last year. They went in there. Again, this is a rematch of last year's championship game. They went in there and won last year. And I think if Mahomes was healthy, I would lean the other way for the revenge factor. But Kansas City doesn't have enough with this guy not being 100%. And he won't be near 100% with that ankle injury. Cincy's defense is extremely underrated. Their offense is clicking. They just put together such a beautiful performance last week against Buffalo. I think the Bengals are going back to their second straight Super Bowl, and I have them winning 27-16.
Yeah, I don't know this year especially. Maybe it's just because of the teams they've played. I don't know why. Like Travis Kelce was eaten on Saturday. He was wide open all game. I mean, he's their best player besides Mahomes. He's their best receiver on that team. And he was just wide open all game.
And especially after Mahomes gets hurt, the ball's coming out quick. Like, he can't make plays, so press up on him.
I don't know why teams don't bracket him more or like you said, press him more.
Especially because they don't have a lot on the outside. Like, their receivers,
not at all. I'm making
mid as could be.
Yeah, if I'm coaching against the Chiefs, I'm making those receivers beat me. I mean, Juju is very average.
MVS.
Very average. Sky Moore is a baby.
Right. And Tony. It's okay.
And Tony's a baby. Yeah. So I'm making those guys beat me. I'm watching the run and I'm watching Kelce. And that's it.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think I agree with you that I think that if it was the Chiefs with a healthy Mahomes, I think that there's a lot that plays into. It's hard to go into Arrowhead and win in that situation in the championship game, let alone a season game. Obviously, we know Burrow's been able to beat them before and stuff like that, but in that spot, with them owing them one, I think that the Chiefs would have won that game. But I just don't see it. And we talked about just now how the D line for Cincinnati is underrated, in my opinion. So I think that they're going to get to him if he plays. And it becomes a question of, I know it's the AFC Championship, but at what point do you evaluate the game and this season versus sacrificing potential years down the road with Mahomes?
I don't think a sprain, it's not like an ACL, like a sprained ankle. If he has the entire offseason, it's going to heal, even if he needs surgery. So it's kind of like, I mean, remember Phil Rivers played an AFC Championship with a torn ACL.
Right.
So like I don't.
But
I
what
don't
happened in that game?
Rivers was still good a couple years after that. Like it wasn't
No,
like
I'm saying in the game, he
oh,
was not like. I mean, they didn't win, and he was a shell of what he would have been normally.
but listen, they have zero chance of winning if Chad Henne's playing. Zero. We
Right.
got to agree with that.
Right.
And
In
so
fact, I don't think it's going to be close. I
even
think that you got
Mahomes gives you
27.
at least a 15% chance. The
Say that-
spread tells you maybe more.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think I would probably say right now, I would guess with Mahomes as is, if he plays, I would guess 31. You said 27-16, 31. I would say 31-16.
Okay. So we're on the same page with where we are there. So we both have Cincinnati. Let's get to the main event.
Yes,
The
sir.
Eagles and the 49ers, the game that we've been talking about pretty much all year on this podcast about finally coming together. And I think the one cool thing that I meant to mention in the last piece that we were talking about is it feels like we have the best 4 teams in the league that are left.
Yeah.
I feel like we got the best 4 teams on both sides. I was looking at this game. These 2 teams actually remind me, they're like almost mirror images of each other in many ways. You know, offensively, San Francisco's got weapons all over the field. McCaffrey, Ayuk, Kittle, Debo. Eagles got Devontae, AJ, Goddard, Sanders. Like they're loaded there. Defensively, they both have really, really good defensive lines. They both have good secondaries. To me, the difference is the quarterback position. And Brock Purdy has done everything that they've asked him to do so far. But now they're asking him to come into Lincoln Financial Field to handle the pass rush. That is the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, the other thing I meant to mention as far as similarities is like you're looking at 2 of the 2 probably best offensive tackles in the game. Would you agree with that? Trent Williams and Lane Johnson?
Lane Johnson for sure. Lane
Right.
Johnson's the best offensive tackle in football.
Trent Williams is right up there.
He's
Trent
right
Williams
there. Yeah, I agree with that.
Fantastic too. The question becomes to me, who do I trust to make a play or not make a mistake? And I think Hurts has done enough for me to value him over Purdy. Add that to home field advantage. And I have the Eagles winning this game and going to the Super Bowl. I have it 21-17. I think it's going to be a slugfest. I think it's going to be the toughest team the Eagles have played all year. I think it's going to be the toughest game that San Francisco has played all year. Yeah, and these two teams match up extremely, extremely well. It's going to come down to one play or one mistake. And I know that's cliche as could be, but I'm going to go with the home team and the team I think has the better quarterback.
Yeah, so I actually had in my notes the same thing. I think both these teams are facing their toughest overall test of the year in this game. And just for the record, I wanted to say, I've been saying since August, I think the 49ers are overrated.
Yes, you have.
I don't want it to. I'm not saying they're a bad team. Let's not get it twisted. They are a good team. I think that especially their defense is a really good unit. When I say they're overrated, I just mean as far as a championship caliber team. I have not this year saw the 49ers and said, I think this team is a Super Bowl contending or a Super Bowl champion type team. When I look at the Eagles, and part of that's because they're different, like, I've said about their schedule, and Al and I have gone back and forth, but the Eagles have played 5 teams that have winning records. 49ers played 4, the whole thing. But I just feel like, to me, with the eye test, I like the Eagles I see the Eagles as a champion caliber team more than the 49ers. The NFC this year was not great. The NFL this year, to be quite frank, has not been that great. I think that, like you said, these are the best 4 teams. And I think you could argue maybe a couple teams in the NFC I don't think you can argue anything in the AFC. I think they're definitely the two best teams in the AFC. And I've been over, and I thought
Who would you say in the NFC?
huh?
Who would you say in the NFC?
I think that somebody could argue that Dallas is in the conversation. I think somebody could, huh?
He just got beat.
No, I know. I'm saying throughout the
sucks.
season. I'm saying throughout the season. I'm not saying right now.
But Dak sucks.
Well, speaking of Dak, how frustrating is that team and that dude? Like we know what we're gonna get. What happens? Like Stephen A. always says, what can go wrong will go wrong. Just be patient, and that's exactly what happens with those dudes every year. This guy threw 2 red zone picks in that game the other night, and they had a chance. The defense played great.
Yeah, and he's so much closer to Kirk Cousins than any Dallas fan wants to admit.
Oh, 100%.
Dude, they get the ball back, 19-12. This is before they punt.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a chance to have his moment, like drive them down the field and tie the game, win the game, whatever they're going to do. And the first play, he should have got pick 6. The dude dropped it. Hit it right in the freaking hands. The first play.
It was like the same play that they had in Jacksonville.
Yeah. Well, the Jacksonville one was a tip ball. This one hit the dude in the friggin' hands.
No, that was the deciding one was a tip. I'm saying that I think the first pick in the Jacksonville game, one of them was just like that.
Okay.
But yeah, and the worst spots too, it's just bad.
It just makes mistakes.
They beat up on bad and mediocre defenses better than anybody. And then their cockroach fans want to come out their holes and their burrows and say, we got the best offense in the league. We're dangerous. We're this and that. You take them out of that dome, that stadium that they have, when that turf, you put them on grass in regular conditions environment like DC, like Philly, like San Francisco, we saw Sunday night. They are very average in terms of their offense. I think that their defense is a lot better than their offense.
Yeah, their defense looked good. And to be fair, offensively, like once they lost Tony Pollard, I think it was done. They were done.
And that was that's definitely a huge loss.
Yeah.
But you can't trust that dude anymore. Like, I mean, every year we know, like, all right, that gonna mess it up. What else you got? Like, we just know what's going to happen, and it happened again. Same with Kirk Cousins. You mentioned him with the comparison. 100% agree. But those guys are in the same boat.
That goes back to segment 1 where I said you pay these guys, $40-50 million, $30 million, 35 for Kirk Cousins, and they're only good enough to win one playoff game. That's what they are. Like
they've now,
that's fine. But that's not what I want for my team. I want to win Super Bowls.
Exactly. They've lost 2 of their last 3 games down to third-string rookie quarterbacks. And I know that Purdy's had a good year. In the what's he had 6 starts or whatever it is at this point. He's been solid.
He's got 8 or 9.
But he's got December 4th is when Garoppolo got hurt.
I'll look at the schedule. But go ahead.
But again, I mean, I could argue also that Purdy hasn't really played he played Seattle, who was 9-8, and then he played Miami, who was 9-8. And other than that, he hasn't played a legit team this year in his starts. So with all that being said, now I didn't see them being a Super Bowl champion type team in the beginning of the year. I definitely don't see them being that with Brock Purdy. I definitely don't see them being that, having to go on the road in Philly, which is arguably the toughest place to play as a road team in the league, if not second toughest. Maybe Kansas City might be a little bit tougher. Buffalo's up there too. But you're asking that a lot of that. It's like if he was like the playing Madden and he was like the create a player mode, and you're going through the season and it's like, all right, you're like got to face the boss team now. Here's your test. Like that's kind of what this is. It seems like to me. Like this is this dude's test. And I honestly don't see it. I think the magic is going to run out. They've won 12 in a row. And some people are going to say that's because they're that good. I'm going to say they are good, but the rent's due. And the rent's got to be paid Sunday night. And I don't think they got it.
Yeah.
And because of that, I think the Eagles are going to win another big margin. I don't think this game is going to be as good as people think it's going to be.
So what do you got?
think that say it again.
What do you have?
I think it's going to be 27-16. And I think that the touchdown the 49ers score is going to be late. I think they're going to be struggling to get into the end zone against the Eagles. I think they'll finally break through in the fourth quarter, similar to how the Giants broke through in the second half of the game Saturday finally. And I think that's it. I think they're going to have a tough time. The Eagles are the number 1 ranked O-line in football. If you believe in the Pro Football Focus statistics and analytics and all that kind of stuff, they are the number one ranked O-line in football. Lane Johnson has not allowed a sack or a hit all season long with a guy that he's guarded. And he surrendered a total of 9 hurries across 551 pass blocking snaps.
Yeah,
so right there, let's think about that. 551 snaps as a pass blocker. Only 9 times has the guy that he went against even hurried the quarterback, let alone hit him or sacked him.
You reached that.
There goes Nick Bosa. Done. Gone. Okay. So you're neutralizing.
Bosa will be his biggest test. Bosa is probably the best DN in the league.
He's up there. You're neutralizing him right then and there. If he's not impactful, that changes the game big time. The D line on the other side.
But do you think they're saying the same thing about Reddick and Trent Williams?
But the Eagles have more than just like so. Like the 49ers have they have a good unit, but Bosa's by far their best pass rusher.
I agree.
The Eagles have what 5, 6 guys that have double-digit sacks.
Yeah, no doubt.
So they have the best D line in the league. They have 75 sacks now for this 75 sacks this year. That's insane. If you count the 5 that they got last week too, in addition to the 70 they got through the regular season, which is second, I think they said second best all time. Okay, so the 49ers O-line, which is also a good unit, they got to be good. You know, everybody's in this boat for a reason at the time of the season, but they got their hands full. And I think that the 49ers, their key to victory in this game. I'll do a key to victory real quick for both teams. The 49ers' key to victory, in my opinion, is they need McCaffrey to go nuts. They're good, similar to how the Giants. I said the Giants, the only chance they have is if Saquon falls out and just we can't do anything with him in the passing game or the running game. Same thing here. If McCaffrey can get loose and get those screen passes and get blocks set up and get 20, 30, 40-yard gains, if he can get 7 and 8 yard runs to set up 2nd and 2s or 3rd and 2s, that's going to be dangerous for the Eagles because the 49ers are really good. One thing they're really good at is holding onto the football in terms of the time of possession.
So that's where I was going to go.
Yeah, so they're a really good team holding the ball. And of course, if you run the ball successfully, you're moving down the field, you're keeping the other team's offense off the field, and you're running down the clock. You're controlling the clock. That's the way to beat the Eagles. Ask the Packers. Ask the Commanders. Okay, the Dallas game with Gardner, that was whatever.
The Saints, Packers.
And the Saints too. And the Saints did that.
Yeah. You said Packers. Packers didn't beat the Eagles.
I'm sorry. I meant to say this. I'm sorry. You're right.
To your point, I agree with you. And I think to add to that, what I was going to say is for me, if San Francisco wants to win this game, they got to jump out to a lead. And they can't fall behind. Because they're able to jump out to a lead, they're able to get into that running game, the play action pass. If all of a sudden it's 10-0 at the end of the first quarter and you're all of a sudden relying on Brock Purdy, like you're saying, that gets them away from what makes them great.
Yeah. And the more you run the ball successfully, you're also minimizing the impact that Purdy has to have on the ball.
Right.
I mean, on the game.
Right.
Which is huge for him being a rookie in that spot in this stadium, in this championship game. Huge opportunity for the 49ers if they can get the running game going. But if they can't, and if our guys step up like they did against Saquon, he had that one run was a 39-yard, 40-yard run, and that was it. He did nothing else. If they contain McCaffrey, who for my money, as hard as I've been on the 49ers, you know McCaffrey's my boy. That's one of my favorite players in the league. He is my favorite running back in the league. And I think he's the best running back in the league, top to bottom, personally. But if he doesn't get going, this game's going to be a laugher. I really believe that. I don't think that Brock Purdy, and I know Brock Purdy does not have it in him to gunsling in the game. Opposite of what you just said, if the Eagles get out big, the 49ers are in trouble. Like if the Eagles are up 10-0 in that same situation, the 49ers are in trouble because you're asking Purdy now to throw the ball more.
Right.
And that D-line is going to be teeing off.
Absolutely. And for me, you mentioned keys. The Eagles' key is they need to tackle because the 49ers' weapons are yak machines. George Kittle is not easy to bring down. Ayuk's probably the easiest of them all to break down. Debo is a beast when he has the football in his hands. He's very tough to bring down. Christian McCaffrey's elusive. If the Eagles tackle, they'll be okay. But you start letting these guys catch wide receiver screens and running for 15, 20 yards and breaking tackles, that's what the Eagles have to do.
I agree 100%. Getting to the quarterback and tackling is definitely the keys for defense. Offensively, the Eagles need to stretch the field. Bottom line. The 49ers daunting defense is 20th against the pass this year.
They can be
Eagles. The Eagles passing game is ranked 9th in passing attack, and they're 3rd top to bottom for their total offense. They're averaging 29 points a game. The Niners are very vulnerable to deep balls and big plays. They gave up 423 yards, passing yards, to Mahomes at home. Mahomes had 34 passing attempts, 423 yards. They blew out they won by 3 touchdowns in San Francisco. Purdy came actually, and on top of that, Purdy came in relief in that game, and I mean, he looked like he was a deer in headlights in that one. He was 4 for 9. He had an interception. He only had 60 yards passing the whole thing. But then also with the Raiders in week 17, Jarrett Stidham, of all people, same amount of attempts, ironically, in 34 attempts, threw for 365 yards and 3 touchdowns. Devontae Adams had 153 yards and 2 touchdowns. Waller had 72 yards and a touchdown. And the Eagles are as equipped with AJ, Devontae, Goddard. Those guys, they are equipped to equal or surpass those numbers that the Raiders' weapons came up with against that defense.
Yeah, they're yards to get through the air. So
I think go ahead.
I just was going to wrap it up. I think we're both on the same page. We both have the Eagles. I have it a little bit of a tougher game than you do. Again, I have 21-17, and one more time, what your score was? What?
27-16.
27-16.
And one more, I wanted to add one more thing too.
Go ahead.
Because I had said that I agreed that this is the biggest test overall, top to bottom, for both these teams. The reason I give the big edge, aside from the quarterback position, is to the Eagles is the 49ers are due for a loss, but also they're traveling across the country, which I think is understated in this situation. They are coming off of a big win against Dallas, which Dallas cockroaches are everywhere. So I'm sure that there's a lot in San Francisco also, and that game meant a lot out there. That used to be a rivalry. You remember when we were growing up?
90s,
that was a big game.
Yeah.
So that meant a lot for the 49ers, I'm sure. But again, the rent's due, man. The 49ers are not the 2000 Rams. They're not the 85 Bears. They're a really good team, but they are a beatable team.
Yeah.
The Eagles are second in the league in big plays, so they are equipped to utilize that game plan that I'm talking about. They have 38 plays this year of 25 or more yards, which is second only to Kansas City, who had 49. So they're pretty far back behind Kansas City, but everybody else they're ahead of. So 38 big plays the Eagles have, second in the league. That's exactly how you beat the 49ers. And because of all that being said, I'm sitting here, me and you, talking to the folks that listen to our podcast that we're fortunate enough to have, and are saying and seeing what we're seeing. And yet the Eagles to Vegas are only 2.5-point favorites, which is basically a pick 'em because they're giving them 3 normally for being a home team.
They're saying the Niners are a touch better.
And I think that's insane, especially with a third-string rookie quarterback coming on the road and winning this game. I can't understand how you can expect that to be fathomable at this point.
Scares me a little bit though. But
with the line?
Yeah, a little bit. I thought it would be at least a field goal. And it opened at 1.5.
Right. Well, it depends. There was 1.5, there was 2. It was a little bit weird in certain spots, but yeah, for the most part, at the worst, between 1.5 and 2.5, and that's still disrespectful for either of those. But yeah, 27-16. I think at one point this game's going to probably be 27-9, that range, and 49ers score late. I think the Eagles are going to the Super Bowl.
So do I. So we're gonna, if our predictions stay true, we both have the Eagles and the Bengals in the Super Bowl,
and it's going to make for a nerve-wracking Super Bowl party, because I don't know how much I'm going to be able to enjoy the party when I'm focusing on this game.
I don't know if I would pick the Eagles in that game, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Fair enough.
We'll be back with segment 3. We got word while we were podcasting that former Philly Scott Rolen has been inducted into the Hall of Fame. We're going to go through some of the other nominees, as well as potential guys from our era that are on the bubble and whether or not they're Hall of Famers, including some Phillies from your mid-2000s glory days. So we will be right back with that. Welcome back, everyone, to segment 3 of the 3K podcast. As I mentioned at the end of the last segment, we got word during the podcast, the MLB Hall of Fame results are out. Fred McGriff was previously voted in by the baseball committee to be inducted this year, but the baseball writers have voted, and Scott Rolen has gotten in. He's going to be the only guy to get in this year from the baseball voters by 5 votes, 76.3%. You need 75% to get in. Chris, he's a former Philly. We've watched him play for the majority of his career. What are your thoughts on Scott Rolen being a Hall of Famer?
So the name to me strikes a lot of different emotions because I remember, he was the guy when we were growing up, right? We were in our peaks of adolescence, 12, 13 years old.
Yep.
And he was a guy on a bad Phillies team. He won 8 Gold Gloves. I'm just looking off the notes I had from just looking at his stats. 8 Gold Gloves, bat 300 twice. He had 500 RBI seasons, Rookie of the Year, 7-time All-Star. He had a 281 lifetime average with 316 home runs, 1,287 RBIs. Great career. But I always had an empty, hollow feeling about him after he left because of how he left. But again, I mentioned how we were 12, 13 years old and early teens. And the reason I'm saying that is now as an adult, looking back, and in the same way that we look back at the T.O. situation with the Eagles and if he should have got paid or not back in 2005 when that whole thing was going on, is how I look at Scott Rolen. Should he still have been – do you think he's justifiably been looked at in Philadelphia as a villain? Because I'm thinking about it and I'm like, the guy's team was trash. And he still gave it all he had every game. He might have talked a bunch of crap on the team and said, I need to get winners around me in this organization. I got to see you guys are committed to winning. But that never affected his performance. No. He always gave it 110% when he played. Very Philly player. Very Philly player.
Really, really Philly player. If he was here in his heyday, we would have loved him.
Yeah.
And the other thing that you don't mention, and again, we were younger, so it's hard for us to really know. But if you remember, he had back issues. And he was playing on that ass turf of Veterans Stadium. He could have very easily had a doctor or his agent say to him, if you keep playing on that turf, you're not going to last 5 more years. It's just not going to happen. And again, I'm making that up, but hypothetically, that was the worst turf in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, and I guess, what was it? I want to say 2002 was his last year here.
Well, 97 was his Rookie of the Year, so that sounds about right.
I think 2002 or 2003 was his last year. He just missed making it to Citizens Bank Park.
Right.
That could have changed the game for him maybe, but he didn't make it to that point. I don't think he believed, if you're going to say he should be a villain, it's because of the fact that I don't think he believed in the team. I don't think he believed and had faith that the organization would have it in them to become a winner. So in that regard, he can kick rocks if that was the case. But if he's just a guy who wanted to win at that point in time, and there were intent, like you said, the turf situation or different things that, he just felt like this isn't a good fit for me here. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I can hold him in that.
I don't think he's a villain.
Villain said, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I would love to know what he thinks about the organization now and the city.
He goes in with a St. Louis hat.
Oh yeah, I would imagine he won a ring with them, right? And he won the World Series with.
Was he on that team?
I think he won the World Series with them.
Yeah, I would think he did too. Do you remember what the trade was? I'm gonna look up.
I'll take a stab at it.
Huh?
Wait a minute. I'm thinking of Schilling. Hold on. He went to the Cardinals. Oh man, hold on. I thought I knew it. Maybe I don't. That was the Diamondbacks.
Of the
I'm thinking about like Dahl and Travis Lee.
Yeah, that was the Schilling trade.
Yeah, I remember that trade.
So Schilling or Rolen was definitely on the who won 06 Cardinals or the
I think it was yeah.
05 or 06 Cardinals. Yeah, he was on both those teams, and also was on the team that went to the World Series in 04. They got swept by Boston. But
so
I'll give you a hint. It's one position player who would later leave the Phillies and then come back to the Phillies. And then it was a starting pitcher who was a prospect who never panned out, and a middle relief pitcher who was a little bit of a lunatic.
Was Turk Wendell in that trade?
No, that's Mets.
Dennis Cook was that Mets too?
So the reliever was probably most known for his years in Boston. The position player is the most known player. He was an infielder, had a couple good years here, moved to Detroit, and then came back.
What? Moved to Detroit. Good years here.
He got traded to Detroit.
And he was an infielder?
He was an infielder. Played on a couple of the playoff teams after 09. I believe he was traded to Detroit, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't have this in front of me, for Ugueth Urbina.
Drug lord now or whatever. Didn't he kill somebody or something like that in Nicaragua or Venezuela or something?
I think.
For
Ugueth Urbina and Ramon Martinez was the trade. But all right, I'll give you the answer since we're more It was Placido Polanco.
That's right.
It was Mike Timlin as the middle reliever.
Mm-hmm.
And the prospect was who once threw a no-hitter for the St. Louis Cardinals was Bud Smith.
That's right. We did get Bud Smith. And we were all hype about that because I think that was after the no-hitter, right?
Yeah, he threw the no-hitter for the Cardinals.
Yeah.
But
Polanco was a good player for the Phillies.
I think the thing that we have to come to terms with, and I think it's really cool. I was thinking about this earlier as this announcement came out. It's really cool now that the players that are getting into the Hall of Fame, like we've had an understanding of their careers.
Yeah.
Like it was 4 or 5 years ago, guys were getting in that played in like the mid 90s and you knew who they were. But like you weren't, again, when we're 9, 10 years old, like you know these players are, but you don't know the game enough to know how good they are. But like when I watch Scott Rolen play, like he doesn't scream Hall of Fame to me.
That was exactly what I was going to say too. Like for me, the eye test, I've mentioned before how big I am on that. The numbers he had kind of were surprising to me. I didn't think he was that. I knew he was a great defensive player. I knew the Gold Gloves.
Right. And that's where I think a lot of the weight is, like 8 Gold Gloves, probably the best defensive third baseman in the last 30 years.
At a premium defensive position.
Right. I think that's where the majority of it comes from.
I mean, he was supposed to be the next Mike Schmidt, all that kind of stuff. And he probably would have been if he stayed. But
I mean, Hall of Famer. Hall of Famer.
But I didn't know that he had 500 RBI seasons. I didn't know he was a 7-time All-Star. I didn't know he went that many.
I didn't realize he was that many time All-Star either.
Yeah.
But listen, I mean, in those St. Louis years, when St. Louis was really good in the early 2000s, it was Pujols, Edmonds, Rolen, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
And like hats off to him. Again, no ill will here. I'm not mad he made the Hall of Fame.
No, I don't. I couldn't care less. I mean,
I wanted to do an exercise where I have a couple guys and I want you to look them up. But these were the next 5 guys on the Hall of Fame list as far as guys who didn't get in and may get in the future, as far as the votes go. But I want to get your idea, and we don't have to dive far into it. Just give me a yes or a no. We can touch on him briefly. Todd Helton. Is Todd Helton a Hall of Famer in your book?
So he was, yeah, I think he is. Just from what I've seen, he bat .316 for his lifetime batting average, 369 home runs, 1,406 RBIs, 414 on base percentage. He went to 5 All-Star games. I thought he actually had went to more than that. I was actually surprised by how low that was.
Double digits. That's crazy.
Yeah. 3-time Gold Glove winner. Eye test for him was definitely a Hall of Famer. He was a boss in his era, especially as a first baseman at that. He hit 372 in 2000 in 697 plate appearances.
Dude, do you remember? I think like going into like roughly August, like he was flirting with 400.
Yeah, he had, and he also that year had 147 RBIs, 216 hits, and 59 doubles.
Yeah.
It's like insane.
And like the argument against him is going to be Coors Field. Like that's what people are going to say. But like that's not his fault.
And no, and not that, maybe home runs, yeah, but not hitting. I mean, he's still got to hit the ball, put the bat on the ball. He still had over 2,500 hits.
Yeah, but the argument again, like the argument that comes with that, against with Coors Field, is like the ballpark itself is bigger, therefore the outfield's bigger, therefore they have to cover more ground.
I'm still. I mean,
he's
again,
a Hall of Famer to me. Like,
fault.
dude, that dude was scary when he came to the plate.
He was terrifying, and he could pick it, man.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely. When we used to play,
pick it,
and again, like we played them in 07 and 09, and you have the stats in front of you. I think that's a little bit past his peak, but he was still scary in those playoff series when he would come to the plate. Like his peak, Helton's peak is what, 03 to 05? Is that when his best stats were?
Well, the year his best year was 2000. 2000 was
2000. Okay, so maybe a little further back. Yeah, that dude could mash. Like to me, he's a no doubt Hall of Famer. That to me, he was a better player than Scott Rolen.
I agree 100%. 100%.
Also, backup quarterback at Tennessee to Peyton Manning.
Yes, he was.
All right, so there's Todd Helton. Let's go on another guy who logged some innings for the Philadelphia Phillies, Billy Wagner.
So I'm actually on his page right now, and he's a prime example of why people are anti-closers in the Hall of Fame. This guy, if you watched him play in his prime, was dangerous. He was devastating. He was one of the first guys that was like the flamethrowers out like 100 miles an hour, 100 miles. Remember, we used to always all cheer when he hit 100 miles an hour, like it was a big deal, right?
Such a prick.
Yeah, he was. Not only was he a prick, but he was good, but like he wasn't Mariano Rivera. Like there's only a handful of closers to me that you can really put in the Hall of Fame.
There's 8,
and he's not one of them.
There's 8. You want to know the names?
So I'm gonna guess. You talking about that already in there?
And like, yeah, and so most of them are older guys. But go ahead.
I'm gonna guess Mariano Rivera.
Yep.
I'm gonna guess, is Franco in the Hall of Fame?
No.
Wetland?
No.
How about one of those the OGs like Catfish Hunter or
no, he was a starter, I think. There's really only one other guy from our era of baseball that's in the Hall of Fame.
Is Rob Nen in the Hall of Fame?
No, you're
I know who oh my God. Hold on, don't tell me. I know his name.
We're getting old, dude.
Hoffman.
Trevor Hoffman's Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
So I'll give you the other names because they're all so Dennis Eckersley.
I was about to say okay.
But okay, here are the last names, and they ring bells. Eckersley, Fingers, Gossage, Hoffman, Rivera, Lee Smith, Suter, and Wilhelm. So again, some of those other guys are older, but those names
is that Hoyt Wilhelm?
Hoyt Wilhelm, yep, correct. But those names, when you hear them, that's what I mean. Like you never saw Hoyt Wilhelm pitch, but I say the name and you know who it is. If I say Wagner, I don't think Billy Wagner jumps out.
No, you think of Honus Wagner before you think of Billy Wagner.
And I also read a stat. If he got in the Hall of Fame, he'd be the first pitcher with less than 1,000 innings pitched to make the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, no, I'm out. I mean, and he had a year where he had 2000 back to 2000. That was a hell of a baseball year, I guess. But he had a 6.1 ERA that year.
How many innings?
But I was gonna say he only threw 27 innings.
Yes, he must have got hurt.
So I'm assuming he was injured to be
the
that
other thing
bad.
with me is, and this is again from my memory, I feel like he would blow saves in big games. I remember that from his Phillies days. I remember the one game against the Astros, he gave up a bunch of homers when we were in Pennery. And even when he pitched for the Mets, like the Phillies would get to him when he would pitch for the Mets.
Especially Burrell.
Yeah, Burrell used to own him.
He owned him. So I don't know. I don't have anything in front of me to say this, but the only leg he has to stand on for me would be his, like, what's the standard for pitchers for strikeouts per 9? He had 11.9, which I'd imagine is pretty high.
That's the other stat I have. Great for you to ask. So I mentioned he would be the only pitcher with under 1,000 innings pitched to get in the Hall of Fame. Among pitchers with 800 innings pitched or more, that's the highest strikeouts per 9 innings in the history of baseball.
Yeah, see, there you go. So
and he's 6th all time in saves.
And his WHIP was under 1 for his career.
Right.
So I mean, look,
great career, not a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I was about to say he was a really good major league player. He was not, to me, he's not a guy that you want to enshrine as a Hall of Fame, especially when we're in an era now where everybody throws what he threw.
Yeah, but that's not his fault.
Well, but the more he's not in the Hall of Fame, the less he's going to have a chance because voters are going to recognize and see these guys now are it's kind of fraudulent to put him in because now the bar is going to be lower for the next guys.
I think you got to look at it from an era perspective and how what they threw in their era. But let's move on to 2 more because I do want to get into depth on some of the Phillies from our era. So the other 2 I want to touch on, Gary Sheffield.
All right, let me say Sheffield because
you can look him up. I'll run some stats by you that I pulled up. 509 home runs for Gary.
Yeah, I'm wondering now.
He finished in the top 10 in the league in home runs 7 different times. He played on a World Series winning team in Florida. He also, believe it or not, has 253 stolen bases and a career average of 292. And he never struck out, not that this is a Hall of Fame stat, he never struck out more than 83 times in a season.
He was a really good hitter.
Really, really good career.
And he bat 300. I'm just counting. 330 and 92 was his career high. And then he had 314 in 96, 302 in 98, 316 in 98. I'm sorry. It's cut in half. What else? 301 in 99, 325, 2000, 311. So he's batted 300 like 7 times.
Phenomenal hitter. Now, I was reading earlier, horrible defensive player. So he gets no accolades for defense, which matters a little bit. But to me, again, from the eye test, when Gary Sheffield came to the plate, he was intimidating. To me, he's a Hall of Fame. 500 home runs to me is Hall of Fame.
9-time All-Star?
9-time All-Star. I don't know. What was his highest MVP vote if you look all the way to the right?
3rd.
He finished 3rd. Was that with Atlanta?
I'm sorry, I lied to you. He was a runner-up in 2004 with the Yankees.
Okay. To me,
and he won a Silver Slugger that year. So he also was a 5-time Silver Slugger winner.
Yeah, dude, to me, that dude was one of the best right-handed hitters of the 90s, and then he carried that. He has longevity too. When did he played? How many years?
Yeah, his rookie year. So his first he played half the season in 89 with the Brewers.
89, Jesus.
Yeah, he played 89 with the Brewers. And
how old was he? Has age there? 20? Was he 20?
Yeah, his rookie. He first got a taste of the big leagues at 19. He had 24 games in 88 with the Brewers, who back then were in the American League for all the young folks listening. And he played 3 years with the Brewers in the major leagues. He played his 125 games in 1990, and then he went down to 50 in 91. So I don't know if he got hurt or he got demoted. I don't know. He only bat 194.
92 or 93, he really peaked with San Diego. He was really good.
Yeah, 92 was his career high, 330. He bat 330, he had 33 home runs and 100 RBIs.
As a 22-year-old.
Yeah, 34 doubles, 184 hits, and he's on base percentage of 385. 323 323 total bases, which also was a career high that year. 3rd in MVP voting.
And we'll talk about this later. What'll probably hurt him a little bit of a dickhead.
Yeah, he was a little bit of a hothead. But that bat swing though, bro.
Yeah,
remember that?
Dude, who didn't play wiffle ball? Who didn't play wiffle ball in their backyard and do the Gary Sheffield?
Yeah, we Sheffield, yo.
Yeah, man, he wiggled that thing like it was a toothpick. So yeah. I got him Hall of Fame. You have him Hall of Fame.
I agree.
Let's go to the last one before we jump into.
By the way, real quick before with Sheffield, so he started at 19. He finished at 40.
21 years. 21 years, and he could hit. And dude, he played on a lot.
He was never an easy out. Even
let me try and go through the teams. Let me try and go through the teams real quick. So he started with Milwaukee. They went to San Diego, then Florida, Dodgers.
Yep, he played for the Dodgers for 4 years. 4 years.
Then it was Atlanta or Yankees next. Yankees.
No, it was Atlanta. 2 years ago.
Atlanta, Yankees. I played with the Tigers for a little bit at the end.
2
Was there a team in
years.
between?
Yeah. No, it was the Yankees and the Tigers for 2 years, and then he finished with the Mets.
Vaguely remember that.
I don't remember that at all.
That wasn't
40-year-old Sheffield with the Mets. That's
I would
about
have not have I would have not have pulled the Mets out, but I vaguely do remember it now that you say it.
yeah, 2009. That was it.
All right, so the last guy I have here is division rival Andrew Jones.
Now, Andrew Jones is a curious case because he was the opposite of Sheffield in a lot of ways. Like he was an amazing defensive player and was an overrated bat.
Overrated bat. And to your point, also, as far as being the opposite of Gary Sheffield, Andrew Jones was like fell off the map at age 30. Like he stopped hit, completely forgot how to hit. If you look at his numbers, after his year in 2006, at age 29, are you have his baseball reference page up?
Yeah, I got it.
Just like from 2007, he had 222, 158, 214, 230, 247, and 197. Just completely, and no power numbers to go along with that.
Yeah, it screams steroids to me in 2005. He all of a sudden had 51 home runs and 128 RBIs, by far career highs.
Yeah, and then 41 the year after that.
Yeah.
To me, his longevity is not good enough. I mean, the case for him is, I mean, have you, in our lifetime, have you seen a center fielder that could go and get it like PK?
No, Griffey, but and Torrey Hunter. Griffey and Torrey Hunter are the best, and Andrew Jones best as outfielders I've had. I mean, Edmonds is up there too, but I don't think he top to bottom is as good as those three.
Edmonds could make plays, but he couldn't cover ground like Andrew Jones. Andrew Jones would like float to the baseball.
Yeah.
He was phenomenal. But again, I don't see the longevity to make him a Hall of Famer in my book. Would you agree?
No, I agree.
How many Gold Gloves? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 Gold Gloves.
That's a lot, though.
Huh?
That's a lot, though.
Yeah, no doubt.
And he did have over 400 home runs, but the home run total nowadays is not what it used to be. The 400 is like really good, but it's not great anymore like it was.
Fair enough. All right. Do you want to get into the Phillies? Hold on. All right. We're having a little bit of technical issues for Chris, but I do want to just ask him, and maybe I'll touch on it briefly after you leave. Jimmy Rollins, Chase Utley. Oh, there he goes. We lost him. So I'll touch on it briefly in regards to Jimmy Rollins and Chase Utley, in my opinion. To me, again, we're in a state where we have the opportunity to see everyone do their thing. And sorry, Chris is texting me and telling him and cursing because of the technical difficulties that he had. We have the ability to see these players play now, and the eye test to me is a huge part of it. And to me, if Scott Rolen is a Hall of Famer, then Jimmy Rollins has to be a Hall of Famer. It's only his second year on the ballot, so he has time to garner. And it looks like he increased his percentage by 3, which, again, I don't know all the intricacies of the voting and how that goes. But he got 9% last year. He's up to 12%. I was shocked to see Jimmy was only a 3-time All-Star. He was such a good player for so long. I was shocked that he only made all 3 All-Star teams. But you're looking at a guy with almost 2,500 hits. He's a career 265 hitter, 231 homers, 470 stolen bases. He is an MVP. He has 4 Gold Gloves, and he was the leader of the team, the best National League team in the first decade of the 2000s. To me, he's got to be a Hall of Famer. He was such a good player. Omar Vizquel had over 50% of the vote a few years ago before falling back because of some off the field incidents. Jimmy Rollins is considerably had a better career than Omar Vizquel. I did pull a stat that I saw in an article in regards to best shortstops of that era. Derek Jeter had a 71 WAR, so wins over replacement. He had 71 wins. Jimmy Rollins is second in that era in regards to guys who have played over 500 career games at shortstop, or at least 50% of their games at shortstop from 95 to 2009. The other guys just below him, Miguel Tejada, Troy Tulowitzki, Nomar Garcia-Parra. I mean, find me anybody who thinks any of those 3 players were better than Jimmy Rollins as far as all around for shortstop. So I'm not just saying it because he was my favorite player growing up, but to me, Jimmy Rollins has to be a Hall of Famer. Another comparison, Barry Larkin. Again, Barry Larkin's prime was a little bit before my time, and Barry may be a touch better than Jimmy. And if you look at the resumes, but at the end of the day, Jimmy has more hits, runs, homers, steals. Comparable. They both have one MVP, but Barry Larkin got into the Hall of Fame in his third year on the ballot. And for that to be the case, I think Jimmy certainly has a good case to get it in by maybe his sixth or seventh year. I do feel a little different on Chase Utley. I wanted to be able to go on here and say that I think Chase should be a Hall of Famer because Chase's peak was elite, one of the best second baseman peaks of all time, but he just didn't have the longevity to rally some of those counting numbers that Jimmy has. Chase is a six-time All-Star. He won 4 Silver Sluggers, career 275 hitter with a 358 on base, 465 slugging. And from 2005 to 2009, he was a top 10 player in all of baseball, in my opinion. He was that good, his peak. I think he had a year where he hit 330. Just phenomenal. And, he came up as a player that we thought was going to be a poor defensive second baseman, and he really, really improved. Never Gold Glove status, but he was very, very solid defensively, and a core part of those same Phillies really, really good teams. But he just, again, that peak for me was not long enough, and as good as he was, just not good enough to add up those counting stats to where it was. So I don't have Chase Utley getting in the Hall of Fame. Chris and I wanted to touch on some of the steroid guys, the A-Rods. There were a couple other guys on the ballot this year that I think were in that. Jeff Kent, I don't think Jeff Kent ever had steroid accusations, but Jeff Kent, not a Hall of Famer. Kind of, again, eye test, I thought he would be. But with Chris having the technical difficulties, I'm not going to bore you guys too much with, my thoughts on the steroid allegations. I do think that the Baseball Writers of America are a bunch of old white guys, and I do think they hold grudges against guys who are not media friendly, and take that for what it's worth. I don't think it's in a player's job when it comes, again, I want to walk the line. Should players be respectful of the media? Absolutely. But when we're judging Hall of Fame baseball players, what they did to media or what they did to baseball writers or comments, if they were assholes, should not be in the equation. It should be what they did on the playing field. We want to judge the Hall of whether or not they're very good guys. That's a completely different story. But I don't think we should be judged on how we treat our people. And I think Jeff Kent maybe, if he's not Hall of Fame, he should have gotten more consideration. He's probably the best hitting second baseman of all time. I mentioned the name of, who did I just mention with the steroid? A-Rod. Manny Ramirez is one of the other names that, with the steroid allegations that comes up. But that's a whole other topic, and I'm not going to monologue that for you guys by myself. But that will be it for segment 3, episode 29. Looking forward to this weekend's championship game. We're hoping that we have a Super Bowl preview episode coming up. We're also going to do a draft or a list coming up of the things you must have at your Super Bowl party. So if you're going to be hosting, you better be listening. We will catch you all next week, and I'm going to drop that beat.